So Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu tweeted yesterday that the rapid decline of Omicron pandemic restrictions will be lifted sooner than later. And considering when to do so, health officials must factor in natural immunity, not just vaccination rates. Wow. It's about time. This CDC chart recognizes natural immunity, and so should health officials. Liu's tweet comes as the CDC has finally acknowledged the strong protection people have after being infected with COVID, known as natural immunity. The scientists found that after Delta became prevalent, natural immunity was more protective against infection than vaccination.
Well, here in D.C., vaccine and mask mandates are still in effect despite declining case numbers and high vaccination rates. Some restaurants in the city are laying their livelihoods on the line in defiance of the mandates. One example was the Big Board, a veteran-owned restaurant here in the district, who had their liquor license revoked as punishment for violation of public health guidelines. Now, while attending a fundraiser for the bar, sans alcohol, sadly, I saw a familiar face there, our next guest, Senator Rand Paul. The senator has been publicly against the mandates and joins us now to discuss further. Welcome, Senator.
Glad to be with you. Yep. Anything I can do to help a business that wants to resist ridiculous government edicts, I'm all in. And it's kind of sad. I mean, they took their liquor license within a couple of hours and then padlocked the building on the next day. I mean, it is really disappointing and really not based on any science at all. I'm of the opinion, if you look carefully at all of the different mandates, that nothing that man did other than vaccination altered the course of the disease. I do think vaccination and also natural immunity together are gradually building up immunity and that the virus is slowly weakening as well. But I don't think plexiglass, masks, 6 feet of distance, I don't think any of these things change their trajectory, nor do I think there's good evidence that any government mandates actually change the incidence of the disease.
Well, and I've been very heartened to see, really, in just the last few days, I'm starting to see Democratic officials, public health commentator people start to be much more open to actually getting rid of these mandates. Dr. Leanna Wen said the other day, well, that now the science has changed. I'm not sure the science actually has changed much in I don't think there's a lot new in the past few months, but are you relieved at least to hear that, now they are saying, okay, well, we can't do the mandates forever?
It is. It's evidence that this is spreading beyond a Republican-Democrat thing, that now you actually have Democrat governors. And I think they're hearing the pushback. They're getting the pushback from moms and dads in schools. And also, it is absurd. I mean, since the very beginning, if you're wearing a loose-fitting cloth mask, it's going around the mask. If not through the mask, it's going around the mask. Even better masks often are almost impossible to keep a perfect seal on. And for a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old to do this is, very much impossible. You're on a plane, they let you take it off for 15 minutes to eat. I mean, so really there's never been any good science on any of these edicts. You want good evidence that it can spread on a plane? That Mormon missionary plane that went to the South Pacific Island, everybody was negative when they got on the plane. When they landed, 42 out of 54 people were positive. So guess what? With a mask on a plane for a long time, yes, it'll probably spread there as well. But the good news is it's mutated to a less dangerous form. And now what we should be emphasizing is treatment. I'm a big believer that early treatment can save lives. And I think the government, particularly government advisors like Fauci, have been really largely negligent in promoting treatment and the idea that treatment needs to be done before a certain period of time. I mean, if you wait 10 days, most of the treatments don't wait very well. If you wait till your oxygenation's below 90 and you're about to have to go on the ventilator, most of the treatments don't work very well. But there are several treatments out there that even the mass majority of the medical community accepts, but you got to get them early. And this should be the public service we should telling people, particularly if you're over 55, over 65, or overweight at any age, that as you're getting sicker in the first couple of days, if you're developing a significant cough and you think you may have pneumonia, you need to get in to see your doctor because there are treatments. The monoclonal antibodies, 80 to 90% reduction in hospitalization if you get them early.
And Senator, you've had this high profile back and forth with Dr. Fauci for a long time. And on this show, even going from left to right and even going back to the previous hosts, we've been awfully critical a lot of what Dr. Fauci has done. But I'm curious from your perspective, as you look back at his tenure over the last couple of years, what would you say that Dr. Fauci has done well?
Very little, because I think he represents central planning. And the same way central planning doesn't work for an economy, it doesn't work for medical advice or medical dictates. I tell people to imagine that he were a family doctor in Peoria and that he'd be less dangerous or less harmful because you could choose to go to another doctor. When you centralize the authority in one person, and he essentially is that person, his dictates permeate throughout the whole economy, and so any of his mistakes are magnified throughout the rest of the world. The biggest mistake he made is, I think, actually a purposeful one. So it's not really a mistake or an error, and that is on protective immunity from getting the disease naturally. And I think if he were being honest with us, I truly believe that he knows that the protection from natural immunity, but he discounts it because he thinks it would be a disincentive to people getting vaccinated. Even on that, I think he's wrong, because if I were to try to encourage people to get vaccinated, I would tell them this. If you came to me and you were hesitant to get vaccinated, I would say, look, the vaccine, if you take it, you're going to be 20 times less likely to go to the hospital if you have a vaccine. If you've already had the infection, 55 times less likely to go to the hospital. They both work. So why don't we test you to see if you've had the disease? If you've had the disease, you can feel assured that you really don't need a vaccine. And I think that's true. He's unwilling to say that. If you haven't had the disease, I think personally, if I were in practice, I could convince people that it would be in their best benefit to get vaccinated if they haven't had the disease, because the vaccine reduces your hospitalization 20 times. But short of that, it's actually the opposite. If you tell me all the vaccines work and the masks work and I'm this independent cuss and I listen to you and I don't believe you, I may get even further afield and say I don't believe the vaccine works at all. So I think because he's been dishonest on things where people absolutely know the protective nature of the infection, because he's lied about that and been dishonest, he's actually discouraged people and made the belief or the ability to believe in the veracity of what the government's telling you, he's actually damaged the institution of government and really damaged the idea that vaccines are good for you, because he's lied on so many other things. So I guess I didn't really tell you what he did well. I had trouble getting to what he actually did well. Sorry, but.
And on the flip side of that, one thing that is really has been troubling for me throughout this is the idea that once you're vaccinated, you can't get the disease. And a lot of people, I've even seen in my own just anecdotal, inner circle, that have believed that, well, I'm vaccinated, so I can't get COVID. And then they get COVID and they don't believe they have COVID, for one. So they're going around thinking they've just got a regular cold and they're not really taking precautions. But then two, I know people who have, they're older and so they have ended up slightly more severe. And they weren't willing to get those early treatments early on because they thought, well, no, I'm vaccinated, so I'm totally safe. And so I think that messaging has caused a lot of problems in both directions, for sure. One thing I want to ask you, though, about that in regards to natural immunity is that a lot of people, from my understanding, the antibodies wear off. So if we've got guys like Ted Lieu, who happens to be my district rep, and I'm living in LA where there's a lot of restrictions. If they say natural immunity, we're going to start recognizing it. From my understanding, the antibodies do wear off, but your T cell and your B cell, all of that still gives you that robust immunity. So what are they going to do if they say, okay, we're going to start recognizing it? Are they going to say now everybody needs to get tested for antibodies? And because even if you've gotten the vaccine, they're saying if you test for antibodies shortly after, you might not show any antibodies, even if you've taken 3 doses of the vaccine.
I think we could just try freedom for a while, and each individual will make their own decision.
Right.
If you want to get vaccinated, fine. My advice, the thing is mine is just advice. If people want to come to me or listen to me, fine. But if you've just had it, you've gotten something better than any booster in the world, and no doctor should be telling you to immediately go out and get vaccinated. In fact, there is some danger to taking a vaccine fairly quickly. Even the CDC admits it. There's some danger to taking a vaccine quickly after you've just been infected. But Omicron basically became nature's booster and nature's vaccine. The vast majority of people got this, and many got it that didn't even know they had it. But there are important things still out there about honesty. So, for example, there's a Dr. Vinay Prasad, who I think is a very, very reasonable voice on this. He's looked at the myocarditis in young males, age 16 to 24. And without question, when you stratify the data, there's a heightened risk, maybe as much as 10 to 15 times greater risk of myocarditis from the vaccine than there is from the disease in young males. Probably not true in people over 65, but for 16 to 24. But the government, through institutions and through universities, is pushing that your kid can't be in the university. I think Princeton, Yale, University of Chicago have to have a booster. And here is my prediction. You can't sue the vaccine manufacturers, but you can sue your college. And I hope no child dies from this. But should they die after being forced to do something where all of the science recommends against it? The interesting thing about myocarditis is, and this is where Marty McCary is very reasonable too, he says, well, you know, if you really want to get vaccinated, one vaccine might be okay for a young person, particularly someone who's already had the disease. But 3, the incidence of myocarditis goes up with each successive vaccine. So it's completely against the science for a non-fatal disease for a kid. And this is why what I would do is test them. Your kid comes in, he's 18 years old, should I vaccinate or not? I'm against the government completely doing this or the schools. But the thing is, if you want to know, is it the best thing for my kid and I'm a worrier, he gets sick often, should I do it? Check them for antibodies. If they have antibodies, there's absolutely no reason to vaccinate your children if they've already had the disease. As far as the disease and the immunity waning over time, we do know that the coronavirus SARS from 2004, you check people now, 17, 18 years later, they still have immunity. And it isn't only about antibodies. And this is why I don't want to get trapped into saying, oh, I'm fine with the mandate if you allow for people with antibodies. Antibodies do wane over time. And this is a natural way for your immune system. You get a big burst of antibodies. And the reason they don't stay up here is because every time you get sick, if that happened, your blood would just be chock full of antibodies that would be gumming up the system. So we've evolved over time to where antibodies then crest and come down. But then we have this miraculous sort of memory. It's in our B cells, which make antibodies again, but also in our T cells. And they actually found that with the Spanish flu, people alive in the last decade, in their 90s and over 100, still had immunity to the Spanish flu. So I think the rule of thumb of nature, for the most part, is that immunity works. It doesn't always prevent absolutely getting the disease again, but then again, neither does a vaccine. But it probably, in all likelihood, lessens the idea that you'll get a severe illness if you've been previously infected or vaccinated.
Senator, before we let you go, I think the school mask mandates, so we were hoping to see them finally, being gotten rid of in a lot of places. Now that's a local kind of decision to be made in a lot of cases, not something the federal government can have tremendous power over. But what about masks on planes? Do you think we're going to be forced to wear masks on planes, for the rest of our lives? The same way that we still have to take off our shoes and our belts and not bring on a water bottle, even though that also has no connection to anyone's safety?
Let's hope not. I've actually have introduced legislation to try to prevent this mandate from continuing. It's been such a partisan issue that no Democrats have been for it. But now, look, these Democrat senators and congressmen are on the plane every week. Hopefully they're getting tired of wearing it. But there's still a lot of show. I had a nominee for a position come in the other day, sat in my office, and we spoke for 30, 40 minutes without masks on, a couple of feet apart. And then when we got up to leave, he wanted a picture. And he said, do you mind if I put my mask on for the picture? I said, whatever floats your boat, if you want a mask on for your picture, go ahead. I'm not going to tell you not to, but it is theater. Look, even the woman on CNN, who is a big Fauci-loving acolyte who loves all the mandates, she now has said cloth masks are nothing more than facial decoration. And that's been the truth since the beginning. They've known that. But what's really sad is to force people, they really have been true. This is why it's hard for me to think of something Fauci said that is good or did that was right, because he knows he's been lying about the mask from the beginning. He told the truth in the very beginning. No public setting has really, and no big trials have ever shown masks in a public setting to work for infectious disease, for virus-borne diseases. And yet he continues to be dishonest and continue to be dishonest with us. But I hope to goodness we can get them off the planes. It's why I keep pushing and pushing and pushing on this, because finally people are going to get it, that it is just for show. You take them off to eat and drink, and now we have the flight attendants going, sir, you need to put your mask on in between peanuts. We're going to all die here. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes it anymore. They've all been vaccinated if they want to. The whole country can get vaccinated if they want to. Most of us have already had the disease as well. For goodness sakes, I'm going to keep pushing till I can have a pleasant ride, but they treat me as a customer and don't come by and harass you the whole thing. I'm so sick of the way passengers are treated on planes. It's awful.
All right, and one real quick question on Afghanistan. You've said you don't want the Biden administration offering more aid to Afghanistan, but at the same time, the administration is holding on to $7 billion in assets that belong to the Afghan government, and not releasing them back to the central bank as they were before. Do you think that the Biden administration ought to continue holding on to the Afghan assets, or ought to release it back to the Afghan government?
It's probably hard for me to imagine that something we're holding is actually an Afghan asset. We were giving them $50 billion a year. I would think the $7 billion is stuff they owe us. But it also wasn't, it's for a government. This is a government that took over in a military junta. It's not a legitimate elected government. No way in the world would I give them that money. And the thing is we've spent billions and billions, if not trillions there. And I think it's a big mistake. And to reward people, look, as much as I was for leaving the Taliban agreement, they broke every bit of the agreement. They said they wouldn't advance and they wouldn't take cities until we had gone, and they did anyway. So I think they've broken every agreement we had, and I would put that money back in the Treasury. We don't have it to give anyway. I mean, it's, the thing is all it is more borrowed money. So I wouldn't give it to them.
Senator Paul, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more Rising right after this.